Welcome to Leading Leaders Podcast. This is our 2020 Servant Leader Series, and today we have a powerful opportunity to sit down and visit with Miss Cassidy Hundt. Cassidy is an attorney who specializes in helping people get their finances ready when they're not ready. And by that I mean people who are trying to figure out, how do I manage the money that I have when I'm not on earth to manage it anymore? How do I manage the money that I might leave behind to my kids? How do I deal with this long-term care aspect? What do I do in the event of a coronavirus? Who would have thunk, right? But when you don't understand what that process looks like, or how you're going to manage that money or protect that money, or keep it safe from creditors or debitors or taxes, then you need somebody who can walk through that process with you. Today, we're going to be doing a series of interviews with people who are absolute experts in that arena. That's what they do for a living. They are the people that you can trust to say, I need a trust, I need a will, I need to know how to manage this inheritance, I need to know how to keep my great-grandkids from being broke in the poorhouse after I've worked so hard to earn money. So how do I do that? So please help me welcome today attorney Miss Cassidy Hundt. Thank you for being here today.
It's my pleasure.
Now, I said Miss. I presume it's Mrs. because you told me your name was changed from Clark to Hundt.
Yes.
And how long have you been married?
We've been married about 3 years. We got married in 2016.
Kids yet?
Yes, we have one. We just had our first daughter in November of 2019.
Wow, congratulations. What day in November?
24th.
Yeah, it's my birthday. How awesome.
All right.
Lucky kid.
Yes.
Not like it matters. But she will get to have some Thanksgiving birthdays,
yes,
which is loads of fun. Because you get all the pies and all the turkeys and all the cake, and you can claim it all for your birthday feast.
Yep, she had her first Thanksgiving this year. Barely. You know, she didn't get to enjoy it at all, but we did. It was fun.
Very good. So tell me about how you landed here at Lee Hilton PLLC.
I actually ended up here. Lee did my parents' estate planning. I have a special needs sister, so my parents were looking for someone who helps with special needs planning and getting things in order to make sure that if something ever happened to them, that she was taken care of. So we actually came in to do our planning with Lee, and I was in law school at the time. So when came in with my parents, we started talking to Lee about our family and what we wanted to do. And I've always wanted to help the special needs community just because of my connection with my sister. So this opportunity just happened to come up, and Lee was looking for someone. So I started interning for her this summer after they did their documents.
How long ago has that been?
It was 2017.
Okay. So you got a couple of years here in the trenches, so to speak.
Yes.
Now, in the area that you practice within the organization, do you focus on helping those who have special needs?
Yes. So I do all of our special needs planning. I'm also starting to focus a little bit more on our Medicaid. So we had done Medicaid before and then kind of stepped back from it. And we are getting back into that now.
It became very complicated for a while.
Yes, we didn't have enough people. It takes a lot to do. So if we had Medicaid on top of all of our estate planning, we couldn't meet all of our clients' needs. So now that we have more attorneys in place, I'm able to focus on Medicaid again, and we can still have our estate planning and probate clients' needs met there too.
So tell me a little bit about what it's like, both as a sister and now as a mom, just the mindset of dealing with someone who has special needs.
My sister is very easy to deal with. She's a very happy person, so we got very lucky in that sense. We don't have any outbursts of anger or anything along those lines, so she's really great to be with. It teaches you a little bit of responsibility. My parents never really made me feel like there was any difference there between us, but as I got older, just in society, it's very obvious that there was difference between myself and my sister, and then our family dynamics in general, because it is just me and my sister and my family. When I got married, my husband's got 3 siblings, so it was really interesting to watch how people interact with their siblings when they are able to interact with them in different ways. And every family's different. So we got lucky. My sister and I don't fight. We get along really well, but that's not the case for most families, so that's always interesting to me to see that between siblings. And I just learned early on that it's not about me. Even though my sister, if you meet her, the first thing she says is, "This is my sister Cassidy," because everyone, when they talk to her, they want to talk to her, but she wants to make sure that I'm still being noticed. And I don't mind not being noticed, but she doesn't grasp that. But it wasn't ever about me. It was always going to be about what we were going to do to make things easier for her. And that was just how we lived life. And it didn't make me feel left out in any way.
Do you feel like you're a natural empath?
I think so. I'm there was some work there, and there was those times where I thought that, oh, I feel so bad for myself because I have this part of my family that now I can't go and do things because we have something holding us back. But there really wasn't ever anything holding us back. I was just a dramatic teenage girl.
There was two of those. I know what those are like.
Yeah. Looking back now, I'm like, we still did everything. Maybe we didn't go to Disney World, but I'm not sure that I would want to go to Disney World with my sister because it wouldn't be fun. It's not fun to take someone someplace that they don't want to go.
Right.
And we did plenty of things that she could enjoy. So we still were out doing things, and I never missed out on anything.
So moving into being a mom, and obviously you're really early in that cycle,
Yes.
not even a year yet.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? How has that perspective impacted where you're at now?
It's helped, I guess, because so in high school, my job was to take care of my sister. So when I was out of school, summer breaks, after school, I took care of my sister.
So you didn't work at the snow cone factory or TCBY or Subway or anything like that?
I ended up, my senior year of high school, I did work for my mother's company because I was able to bring my sister, but nowhere else really lets you bring your child to work, so I couldn't bring my sister either. So that was my job, is so I cared for her, and if I didn't have someone else to take care of her or to help with her, I didn't get to go do things. And that was fine, but that's how jobs are.
Right.
You know, if you can't get off work, you can't go do things. So that was how it was with her. So I was used to that aspect of life when I had a child, but it is a lot different. So she's still able to function somewhat on her own.
Right.
And then with a child, of course, they're completely helpless for the first.
Very dependent for a while. Yes.
Very dependent for a while. So that's
still high schoolers. I mean,
yeah.
Hopefully not.
But it is really nice to see the interaction between my sister and my daughter. She really loves her, and that's really great to see. And then they have a little bit of a connection because she still has that childlike mindset. So it is really interesting to see that.
Now, I know there are a lot of people, when you talk about special needs, one of the first questions that comes to mind is, what specifically is the special need? Now, let me ask this, though, honestly. In the work that you've done, not only with your sister, but now for the last couple of years in dealing with other families, do you find that the needs, especially from a legal standpoint and from a financial standpoint, the need is really irrelevant? It's the planning that matters most.
Yes, and it can range because the need has a little bit to do with it depending on how independent the child can be or how
and the
independent.
Severity of that, how much specific hands-on care or medical care or device care they're going to need in the future.
Yes, and that has a little bit to do with the finances of it. So if their medical expenses are large because they have a lot of medical needs, then we do have to worry a little bit about making sure we have that money in place to make sure their medical needs are met. But for the most part, it comes down to just making a family feel comfortable that if something were to happen to them, that this child that they've spent their whole life caring for is going to continue to be cared for in the same manner.
Now, how often do you run into like laws, and I'm thinking of a few who on both ends of the spectrum have had traumatic brain injuries or have had accidents that made them debilitated and, for lack of a better term, left as a vegetable. Obviously, significant special needs, significant medical needs, significant care needs and attention needs. Some of them have been taken off life support and allowed to pass. Others have stayed in that state for 4, 5, 6, 10 years. I think the latest one I heard was 28 years in a vegetative state and then came out of a coma and went right back to daily life with no rehab, as if the switch was turned off and then the switch was turned back on. But there are others who would look at that and go, what a waste of 28 years of medical attention and medical care and finances. And how do you cope with something like that? Because this gets to be an extremely emotional investment. I mean, I know some people are really attached to their cats. They leave wills to their cats.
Yes.
But how do you, when it's a human, when it's a sibling, when it's a child, how do you walk through, this is what we have to do legally, this is what we need to prepare for financially, and we need to somehow take the emotions out of that. Is that part of your process?
For the most part, we try to leave the emotions in, but part of the things that we do estate planning wise are those directive to physicians, and that's those when it comes to that end of life decisions, in particular whether or not you want to be kept alive on machines personally. So we can start that conversation by talking about what you personally want. Right. When it comes to a child, that's harder to make that decision But we do bring that up, and
or even an adult who has limited intellectual capacity.
yes, and we do bring that up when we're talking with our clients, and that is something that we can put in there. But most of the time, they're going to have whoever the caregiver is make that decision for them, depending on where the child is on the spectrum. If they're very independent, they can make that decision themselves, and we can do documents for them. If they don't really have the ability to cognitively make that decision, then the parents do kind of need to decide what they want to do in that situation. We try to leave that to the end because there's a lot of other things we want to get done first, and that usually kind of freezes everyone up because that's
Right.
not something you want to talk about. When it's your child, if it's your sister or your brother or anybody in your family that you care about, we don't want to talk about making decisions for
It
them.
becomes a mental roadblock really
Yes.
fast, especially if that's the first thing you talk about. People think, hey, are you just here to bring this to an end, or are you
Yes.
here to help me plan for longevity?
We always kind of approach that, even with with just any of our estate plan, we want to approach it as when this happens, not if it happens, not it's going to happen later on. We want to do when, but we're still looking far in the future.
Right.
So we don't want to have you feel like this is going to happen tomorrow, but we do also want to be prepared if it does happen tomorrow.
I think that's a great motto when planning. Most people say, plan as if you're going to live 100 years, live as if today is your last.
Yes.
So that you can be present and in the moment and apply awareness and skills and everything to right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what has been the most, and obviously you had a first-hand look from an emotional investment as well as from a financial standpoint in the process with your sister and your own parents, but tell me a story, if you don't mind, of anonymously, maybe an incident that you walked through where some of your deepest skill set and your ability to do your job was really challenged because of the humanity involved.
My biggest problem a lot of the times when dealing with clients who have children who have special needs comes when they have no one else. If it's just the client and that child, and trying to decide who's going to care for that child when something happens to the client.
There's no one to hand
There's
the
no
baton
one.
to.
There's no family. There's nobody that we can trust in order to hand that off to, and that's a fear that I don't want to. It's hard for me personally to talk about, and I know it's hard for the client. So it's difficult to maneuver that, and there's options. There's things that we can do, but again, it's a lot of the times when it's their child, even if they're an adult, they've been caring for them for 18 plus years now. So trying to find someone that we're going to trust to take care of our child the way we took care of them when we're gone is difficult.
Right.
And then if we have to discuss whether the child outlives them in any situation, special needs or not, that's hard to discuss with clients as well. So it's hard for me because I knew early on I was going to take care of my sister. There was never a question there for me that was just what I was going to do. When my parents weren't able to, I was going to step in. And I know that eventually, I know my husband, when I married him, we had that discussion. He's willing to do that. I've got children who are going to be willing to do that. That's just something that I knew was my role in
Right.
where I lived in life. And it's hard to think that some people don't have that. So if I hadn't gotten married or I didn't have children, whenever my sister came to me, if I was in that situation, it would be really hard for me to find someone to trust to care for her the way I care for her.
There are a lot of people, unfortunately, that make it to their 30s, 40s, and even 50s with that selfish teenager mindset.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that having this person, I think it was it Gallagher, the comedian, who smashed the watermelons on the stage all the time? I think his name was Gallagher. But one of his entire shticks of his comedy routine was he had a boat anchor and he would put a baby diaper on it. And he said, I remember the days before we had kids and we could go anywhere, do anything, go any time we wanted to. And then he would reach into this high chair and pull out this anchor with a baby diaper on it and throw it on the stage and go, but we have a baby. And he said, every decision you make in life, it's but we have a baby. And I think there are a lot of people that reach their 30s, 40s, and 50s. They're in their prime of their life. They're traveling. They've made their money. They're ready to move on with their own successes in life. And they realize there's someone else I have to care for, whether it's a spouse with special needs or whatever. I worked with a lady more than 25 years ago, she was 73 at the time. She had outlived all 6 of her children and 4 of her 8 grandchildren. They had all passed from car accidents, heart attacks, various things like that. And she said, I'm reaching a place where I have 2 granddaughters and a grandson that I would leave my inheritance to. And she was a multimillionaire. She'd never financed anything in her life because she grew up in a cotton farm family. And she's going, I don't know what the responsible thing for me to do is. If I get to the place where I can't care for myself, these three won't. And I was like, wow, that's a tough place to be, because it, like you said, how do you emotionally deal with that? But then financially, how do you be responsible stewards of what you have to know that the money's going to the right place? Sounds like you got a gem in Mr. Hundt, though, and by the name, I don't even know his first name, but a GEM gem, in somebody who would say, I'm willing to take on Cassidy, knowing that her sister is part of the package and comes with that. That's pretty impressive.
He's a really good guy, and that was part of the benefit of having my sister in my life, is that people who came into my life were always good people, because they knew that if they were in my life, they were in her life too. So that is
kind of a condition of engagement.
Yeah, it's a very good benefit that happens, and it's really hard to, once you meet her and get to know her, it's really hard to not like her.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times that kind of weeded out anybody bad coming into my life, which was very beneficial for me. And I always think that that's my sister's way of looking out for me, because I know that she's protective as much as she can be, cognitively understanding that. So that's her way of being protective of her little sister.
Well, sometimes the limits of cognition give a different level of emotional awareness. I mean, because you can't think through the process, all you can do is feel. And it's at a whole different level of intuition that they perceive. I was raised by a single mom, and then I married a single mom. And years after we got married, she said, I knew you were going to be okay, but in the first couple of months, I'm like, how could you know that before you really got to know me? She said, because I have a jerk meter. I said, is that like a thermometer? She said, no, it's a 4-year-old. And they pick out jerks really fast. And how you treat them is how you're going to treat me, and that's all I need to know. So it sounds like your sister's done a great job for that.
She has. It's been really great. And she really has shaped my life, and I do always try to throw in there too that my parents have as well. The way my parents handled her, the way my parents handled me in our entire situation made a huge difference in my life, because it could have been very different.
Right.
It could have been a lot of stress. My parents could have been arguing all the time. I could have always felt like I was being left out, but I didn't. We were very normal in the sense of the word that people have when they talk about families. Everything functioned fine. It was just that we had this special circumstances that we dealt with, and we dealt with them the same way from day one. So nothing ever seemed unusual to me.
So honestly speaking, would you feel like Cassidy's qualifications for what she does at Lee Hilton PLLC is, if we're looking at a balanced scale, is it more because of law school, or is it more because of life experience?
I think it's more because of life experience. Law school helped me, and law school was a great experience for me. I enjoyed it. I'll tell everyone that it takes a lot, so think about it before you go into it on your own.
So you got what, 6 or 8 years of education?
I have 6. So I did undergrad in 3 years, and then 3 years of law school.
Okay.
And then that experience itself was great, but shaping up to that experience is what makes you who you are in the work
that
field.
Education, right?
Because that experience changes you, and it can change you in multiple ways, just because it's so tough on you physically and mentally. It's just a lot of work. So depending on who you are coming into that changes who you are coming out of it as well.
What did you learn in law school that you apply now in business that you would have thought, if you'd never gone to law school, you thought, that doesn't even make any sense. There's no reason I need to know that?
Almost everything I learned in law school, I feel like...
kind of like high school students with algebra. They're like, really? I'll never use that.
It didn't make any sense. And going into law school, you learn everything. And then after you're done, you focus down on where you want to go. So you learn the broad spectrum of everything, and then you focus down on the specifics you want to work into after law school. So going in, I had no idea what I was getting into. So I don't think anyone really does. So that was a benefit of me coming in with a very open mind, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I didn't think, oh, I'm going in, I want to do criminal law when I graduate. I was like, I'm going in and hopefully I graduate. So I came in with a very open mind, and everything kind of shaped you in that way. I did learn that, and I kind of knew this beforehand, but you definitely learn you're not right, almost ever. So you have to figure out how to work with the fact that everything that you say has some undertones to it, and that you can make decisions and you can say things, but they're not always going to be the right answer, and you're not always going to be the smartest in the room or the brightest, or you're not always going to win.
Somebody's always going to have some way to trip you up or double guess what you said.
Yes, and that was interesting to me. I'm very behind the scenes when it comes to saying, I'm actually not argumentative, so that didn't work out well for me in law school when it came to...
I was just going to ask, were you on a debate team in high school or anything?
No, that did not work out for me in law school when it came to that stuff. I did fine, and I did it if I had to, but every time we had any type of debate or court thing going on, I was just a nervous wreck most of the time, because I know what I think and what my morals and beliefs are, and I can convey those really well, but I can't convey telling someone that theirs is wrong. So when someone tries to say that something is supposed to be one way, if I have to tell them that, no, they're wrong, I'm not very good at that. I can tell you, no, this is what I think, but I'm not very good at telling people that what they're saying or what's coming out of their mouth is wrong.
So you are a natural empath.
Somewhat. And I didn't realize it until law school, until we had to start being, because I can be assertive if I need to be, but I prefer not to be. I prefer people to have their opinions and I have mine, and if they don't match up, that's fine. It doesn't matter if we don't believe the same thing, if we don't think the same way, we can still get to where we need to go.
We'll find common ground anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. My wife, over 25 years married, I describe sometimes that she has a catitude. And by that I mean it's like trying to put a cat in the dryer or in the washing machine. It's just not going to happen. You could pull the cat's tail off. She's not going to change her mind. She's not going to go another direction. But for the most part, she's just a quiet little fluffy cat. She just lays there. She doesn't say much, maybe 20 words a year. It takes a lot to get to know her. She's a very deep thinker. Degree is in psychology. Very deep thinker. Very poignant communicator. She just doesn't do it very often. And so a lot of people take her to be silent or shy or stuck up or terrified or horrified, especially since I do all the talking. But when she opens up and lets it come out, you're like, how did you know that? Well, I heard you say that like 3 years ago. And you're like, I didn't realize that. And so that kind of goes back to that law school. You're like, you don't realize the things that you didn't intend to say. And I've heard Lee say, sometimes we end up solving problems somebody else has created because they tried to write this their own way and they didn't realize that what they thought was pretty direct wording is actually extremely confusing, or vice versa. What they intended to be a little bit vague for the purpose of weaseling later is very direct and not good.
And that's a huge problem in the documents that we do. And that's also why I know Lee's talked about how we're parts of some associations that have nationwide attorneys, and that's why we have that and why we kind of sit down and talk all the time too, because it always changes. Because the way words are on a paper are going to be read differently by every person that reads them.
Yes, and just moving from one county to another that can change, but from one state to another that can change. I had a chance to do an interview with a guy, I haven't even finished editing it yet, but he has a PhD in law, started as a patent attorney in Russia. Now he's a Canadian resident and a citizen of Russia still, and has a doctorate's degree in international trademark law. And you're like, who needs that? But like you said, you start very broad, you worked very specific. And so some of the stuff that he does in the way of trademarks and patents, people are like, I didn't even know I had to have one for that. And he's like, you have no idea how fast people will steal your idea and make millions of dollars on it. And when you come back to claim it, you realize, and it happened if you watch the movie The Founder, Ray Kroc created McDonald's Corporation. The McDonald's brothers lost their own name because they didn't understand the power of the legal aspects of a trademark. Powerful, powerful stuff. And not understanding the legal language or what those words actually mean compared to what you think they mean, that can be pretty significant.
And that is an issue that we deal with a lot of the times too, is that, and even coming into this, there's a lot of things that we always kind of joke, you can't die easily anymore. And you can't. I mean, depending on how your family is, sometimes that works out for people, but we do have a lot of the people, we see the harsher side of things when it comes to post-death for parents who had all these kids who got along really well before mom and dad were gone, but when mom and dad were no longer in the picture, the kids don't get along anymore. and they start arguing over things and money, and we know that mom and dad are rolling in their graves. So we want to set it up to where even if we've got all these great kids, they all get along really well, in the event that one of them decides to get a little greedy or one of them just grieves differently than the others, we have everything set up to flow the way mom and dad wanted it to whenever something happens to them.
And sometimes it's that sibling's greedy spouse
Yes.
that causes some of the problems.
And there's always outside factors that we have to, like spouses, children, anybody else. If the sibling has a grandchild or a child who's in their ear too, right. And everyone grieves differently, and you don't really know how you're going to grieve until you're grieving. And sometimes the way people grieve also clashes. So some people see it as greed, and some people are just very distraught and can't do anything. So some people see that as lazy, and it just depends on how people perceive that grieving too, and how that works for people later on as well.
And sometimes even to the point of, I want to hold on to this person even against their own directives. Mm-hmm. I want to hold on to this person even though everybody else has said goodbye. I want to hold on to this person. And it may be the things, it may be the money, it may be the actual person. Mm-hmm. And those become very obviously sensitive, not just from a legal standpoint, but from an emotional standpoint as well.
Mm-hmm. And there is a wider range of ways people react to that too. There are some people who want to get rid of everything. There's some people who want to keep everything from mom and dad. And then when it even comes to life decisions, we do go, like I said, we do those directives to physicians, and when we're talking through that with the client, we want them to know that if their decision is, if I have no hope, I don't want to be kept alive on machines, I don't want to be living that lifestyle, right. And your daughter tells you, oh, I would never be able to let you go, then maybe we don't let that daughter be in charge of that decision. And a lot of the times people will still put that daughter in charge. And then their wishes, of course, are not being met when it comes to that time because the daughter let them know that that's not something they can do. We do have the option of not including families in that. So you can have just two doctors say, this is it, they're in this vegetative state, they're in an irreversible or unchanging condition, and that if that's what they decide, here's what this paper said and here's the decisions we make. And sometimes people do that because when it comes to the emotion part of it, there's a lot in that, and occasionally kids don't want to be the person to make that decision.
Well, and sometimes you end up with the opposite end of that. I mean, recently in the news, I think it's only been in the last 6 months or so, there's a hospital in our local area where the child was under the age of 10 and dealing with some medical battles, and some physicians said recoverable, others said not worth the expense, and the parents are like, we will spend all expense. And the doctor's like, no, say it's not worth the trouble. And it became a legal battle as to whether or not the child was kept alive. That is an enormous stress and strain on any relationship. But if you look at that as a parent and go, okay, now they're 23 and still on a hospital bed, and we haven't been able to go back to work, and we haven't been able to be self-sustaining, and we haven't been able to get our minds, straight in life yet, that's a whole nother set of worms. Mm-hmm.
And we run into that a lot too. So we do run into, obviously what's going on in the media also affects what's being discussed in our meetings with our clients.
I bet, yeah.
So anything that's going on that's being publicized, that brings it up. And that also brings it up for us. So if it is something we never thought of, then that's something that we can look into, and we can figure out how to talk about that with clients who are going to be concerned about it now, because that's something that's on their mind because it's being discussed.
It's an awareness. So the Secure Act, I know Lee's talked about that quite a bit and does a full seminar on the Secure Act. That's a whole new can of worms, even in your category of special needs, because the limitations for the duration of care and the financial ability to do that beyond 10 years, that becomes pretty significant pretty fast.
That has changed a lot for us because we did used to set that up, and that was mostly what people were leaving for their kids. So if they wanted to leave anything for their children, it was their retirement, and that was able to be stretched out and used for their children for the most part until recently. And with law changes like that as well, they also are kind of something that 5 years from now we'll be able to flow through this really well. But when they make the law changes, they don't really come up with here's the game plan. Right. So everyone's then scrambling to this is the law, here's how we're interpreting it. It also gets interpreted several different ways until some changes are made that say, no, this is how it's supposed to be interpreted.
Some kind of precedent.
Something has to be set. And so when it's fresh, that's really hard to do. Right. It's really hard to plan for. But luckily with this, it has got a broad enough spectrum to it that we can plan for it. But when it comes to special needs, any of the other smaller, narrow characteristics there, we do have to be careful where we're treading because there is no precedent. So when there isn't any precedent, if we're interpreting it a certain way, you have to kind of preface it with, this is how we are interpreting it, this is how the people we work with are interpreting it, but if things change, here's what we can do. Because when there's no precedent in place, you're kind of just hoping you interpreted it the correct way.
Well, like you said, nothing means what you think it means. And
Yes.
you're never right. So
Ever.
You're going to lay out a plan and a strategy and put some tactics in place, and then somebody's going to come along and go, yeah, not so much.
Yeah, and you can read something that you think, like you said, is very, very clear. It's plain English, the way you read it, sentence structure and everything is exactly what you learned in elementary school, but then another attorney or some judge is going to come in and say, no, that's not what that means.
If you had 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes to sit down with someone who has a special needs child, who has always just said, whatever happens, happens. I don't really have anything in writing because I have nothing to leave. I don't have a big inheritance. I don't have a 401k. I've spent all my life as a caregiver. I've spent every dime that I have taking care of them. What advice, what recommendation, and I know there's a level of, here's what I recommend to you, and then legally here's what we need to do for you, and you're going to have to come into the office for us to do that. But in that initial, if you met them on the streets, they found out what you did, what would you say to someone who says, I got nothing to leave, I don't know who's going to take care of them? What would you recommend for that just starting out of the gates?
I recommend with those people, those are actually the people who need to come in and see us the most, because people who say they have nothing probably don't, but they do have enough to be living right now for the most part. And if we leave a child who's on Medicaid or Social Security or anything along those lines more than $2,000, they're going to lose that. So if we leave that child $2,002, they're going to lose those benefits, and then we're going to need someone to reapply for them. Otherwise, they have $2,000 to live on for the rest of their lives. So we do need to set it up to where it goes to them, where they don't lose their benefits.
And that could be something as simple as a car.
Yes.
I mean, if your car has a capital value of $3,010 and somebody goes and sells it, that money now belongs to that child. Mm-hmm. And if there's not some other dispensation of it, it changes the whole ballgame.
Mm-hmm. And there's several ways to look at that too, because you could leave them enough that they could live on it the rest of their lives. But usually in situations like that, especially with children with high medical needs or any type of special needs in that sense, they're on some type of governmental assistance in order to meet their needs. If there's any medication, medical needs, nobody can meet those nowadays with the expenses that those come into. So if they get kicked off what provides them with the medicine that leaves them healthy or keeps them functioning, what are we going to do? So if we leave them money, we want to leave it to them in a way that doesn't happen. And we also want to leave it someone in charge that can help them if something were to come up. So if something were to happen, if we're going to just leave them money willy-nilly and they're going to get kicked off their benefits, we want someone there to then reapply for them, because those more than likely are not going to last their lifetime. So we have options, there's things to do, and it depends on what you want to do personally, but there always should be something done when we have a child who has medical or physical needs that need to be met when the parent's gone.
And if I remember right, one of the services that's offered here is the trust manual that actually tells somebody, now that you've been given this responsibility, this authority, there's some expectations of you, both within the family and by law, that you're expected to uphold, things you have to do, ways you have to keep things separate, et cetera, et cetera. So that trust manual is a pretty powerful tool for somebody who's handed that responsibility. Yes,
it's very helpful. The trust manual really does have drawn out instructions for everyone, even people who don't have special needs. So for all of our clients who have a trust, they leave with a trust manual, and that leaves instructions to their children, to whoever we have listed, friends, family, as a successor trustee on what they're supposed to do when something happens. And even in any situation, generally when a loved one has passed away, you're not thinking about what you're supposed to do as trustee now. You're not thinking about what you're supposed to do financially to get all of their stuff. You're still grieving. So that is an instruction book there that helps you, so when you finally have the time to cope and sit down, you can look at it. And even for our younger generations now, we do put that on a flash drive, so you can search for your question on the PDF and you're able to find your answer within seconds. Or again, in all of our documents, we have our information in there. So if they need to call us later on and ask questions, that's what we're here for. And that's what most estate planning attorneys are going to do. So if something were to happen and Lee Hilton's not around anymore, we do create our documents to where our clients are still always going to have the help that they need, and there's enough in there for another attorney or somebody else to help them out, because we don't ever want our clients, if we're not around, to be struggling.
Right. And tell the mom who is in great health taking care of a special needs child what you would say to her to make sure that she's prepared.
Regardless of where you are in life right now, if you do have a special needs child or a child, period, whether it's with special needs or not, you're gonna want that child to be taken care of when something happens to you. And in most cases, if that child's a minor, if that child has special needs, if you have nothing in place, what you want for that child is not conveyed in any way. So in order for that child to be cared for the way you're caring for that child, we need to have something there. It needs to be in writing, it needs to be binding, it needs to be down. And that way, whenever something happens to you, your child's still receiving the level of care that you provided to them when you were around. Because great health or not, we're not promised tomorrow. And as grim as that seems, we do still want, whenever we have children involved, to be aware of that. Because we want our child to be cared for properly if we're unable to care for them.
Excellent, Cassidy. Thank you. Great words. Well said. I thank you again for being here. Thanks for being a part of the Leading Leaders podcast and the 2020 Servant Leaders series. Thanks again to Cassidy Hundt for the time that she spent with us today. I know that this is important data for you, whether you have a special needs child or not. I encourage you to go to leehilton.net. That's LEIGHHILTON, leehilton.net. And just check her out and see how they can help you with your planning needs for what's coming in the future. We've got some more people on the team here to talk to who have other areas of specialty. And I think when we wrap up today, we're actually going to have some time to sit down with Lee herself. So we'll have a chance to really get behind the mind of what created this entire series and service. I know she's been in this business for more than a minute. So we look forward to getting her assets. Thanks again for being a part of the Servant Leader series. Have a blessed day.